Welcome to Soulful Practices podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Holling Brooks, and over the past 20 years, I have been on a journey of healing and awakening. I'm also a coach and practitioner for clients on their journey of unbridling their true self. The number one question I'm asked is, what meditation or practice will help me reach my goals? While there is no one meditation or secret mantra that will unlock our own awakening, there is a doorway that will lead us there. And that's the doorway of learning and cultivating the skills of self-reflection and contemplation. Each episode of this podcast offers you pocket teachings and practices that you can implement right away to help you courageously connect with living your authentic soul-led life. Let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of Soulful Practices. We are in season 2, and over the next couple months, we are going to be exploring how we can cultivate greater connections with the soul medicines of love and compassion. So being open to having more access to self-love and compassion really allows us to bring that not only to ourselves, but to those around us. So that when we find ourselves triggered or out of balance or lost in those negative self-talk loops that we're also then manifesting and projecting onto others, we can find a stillness, find the pause, open to the self-love and compassion, and begin again, like I talked about in episode 13. So this week's pocket teacher to help us really set up that soulful practice this week is by the writer and poet and 1800s American transcendentalist, Ralph Emerson. So he is quoted saying, "Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience." And I really love this quote because it invites us into a hidden medicine and an alchemical, mystical element that is the act of surrender. Because within this quote, for us to step into patience, patience really invites us to surrender our belief that something is amiss. And when you look at the definition of patience in the dictionary, to me it leaves a little less to be desired because it boxes it in to a very specific thing. So the definition of patience in the dictionary is that to be able to accept and tolerate, to have patience, is to be able to accept and tolerate delays, problems, suffering without becoming anxious or annoyed. So this definition just by default is limited. It's saying, hey, when there's delays, when there's problems, when there's suffering, we need to not feel annoyed. We just need to accept that they're there, and therefore that's when I'm going to call on patience. So it automatically says that there's something wrong, right? That there's something that, hey, here's our plan, here's our thoughts, here's our desires. Something's gone wrong with that plan. Something's out of, quote, alignment. But is that true? And that's what the pace of nature is inviting us to challenge this egoic idea that our ideas, our timelines, our preferences, our inspirations and the line that we see, the runway that we see to take those off in there, that if it doesn't match what we think it should be, that we need to just bring in tolerance because it has something wrong. There's a delay, there's a problem, there's suffering. Excuse me. However, I would like to expand this definition to be more in alignment with what I would call the soul medicine of patience. And the soul medicine of patience works with the, quote, divine timing because it says that there is no such things as delays or problems. Instead, there is a pace that's happening that's just outside of what a part of us would prefer or thinks should or should not be happening. So the issue or the problem that comes from the wrinkle of divine timing is that it often is not the same thing as our own personal divine desire of what we say divine timing is. So the working definition I would love to invite you into as we work through the practice this week and as we continue through this episode is really this idea that patience is a willingness to surrender our personal fears, storylines, worries, projections, desires, preferences on what is happening when something isn't matching the timing that we think it should be, right? And when that happens, we can go usually into one direction or another. We go into trying to control it, Like, what do I need to fix and how do I need to get this quote back on track, right? And we start pushing or we start blocking. We can feel the currents of change coming in, and we want the house of cards that we built to stay there. If we start trying to build little dams and sandbag around it and reinforce the walls, so to speak, of our projects, of our goals, of what we want, attempting to dictate how something happens. And also, when we start to feel that the outcome is going to be something different than what we originally thought, we can try to double down, right? To get in there and make things happen and start to bulldoze through things. The exact same thing can also happen of when we feel the guided motion to be in a timing, to be in a thing, that we separate ourselves by avoidance, procrastination, self-doubt, punching holes, so to speak, in that idea that we like, hey, go reach out to that person. Well, maybe they wouldn't, dot, dot, dot. And so it's all the different ways in which we kind of play with time, right? And that is what we're being asked to surrender. In this quote, adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. Her secret is she surrenders to this idea that it is beyond one particular person, place, or thing that is bringing thing in. So one of the other things that is very interesting about this quote is it brings forward this concept of interconnectedness, right? It brings forward this concept that divine timing or the pace of nature is way more than one being. It's way more than just my thoughts, my actions, my ideas getting played out. And so the problem with this idea of the pace of nature is it often goes very much against what is currently the trend in most spiritual and healing arts circles, where the current trend is that we are beings of manifestation and creation. Our thought creates our form. We create our reality. We have an idea and inspiration, and we can manifest that and create that and bring that through. While this is not wrong, it's not the whole picture, right? And so therefore it creates this very toxic belief system that we are the masters of our own reality, and that everything, therefore the divine timing and our heart's desires timing are the same thing. And this is reinforced outside of these spiritual and healing circles because of the demands of just how we now live culturally. We are a culture that is very addicted to quick dopamine hits, right? We want instant gratification, satisfaction. We want outcomes that match what our desires are. And if we don't get that, we have to break it down, problem solve it, and get it back on track and get it in there. So the result is that we've really taken these limiting beliefs that take slivers of mystical truth, and we've meshed them together in a way that is really tricky and I think really toxic for ourselves and for our own well-being, and then kind of collectively for the well-being of the whole. Because what it really does do is it keeps us from actually being in the way of seeing ourselves as a whole, to seeing ourselves as part of nature. And instead, it's taken us out of it. And it's created a whole bunch of little individuals that, yes, we are individual beings, but we are interconnected. And together, leading our authentic life is also about how is that interconnectedness and how are we contributing and bringing into that, and also how are we working with things when the problem is it doesn't match what a personal desire is, no matter how altruistic our goals are or how beautiful they would be or what they would be able to serve. We can get into this real idealistic way of like, we're going to push energy into the world and we're going to make something happen and we're going to manifest it. And the question is not, can we? Because we can. The question of timing, can we manipulate time? Can we do different things with it? Yes, absolutely we can, because time is just subjective. Our body and the energetic world are outside of quote unquote time as we measure it, right? It doesn't work in that way. And quantum physics has really brought that in to the forefront of what spiritual traditions have been seeking. So the question isn't, can we manifest? Yeah. Can we manipulate time? Yes. The question that Emerson invites us into is, are we willing to take that ability, that manifestation, that God force within us, and are we willing to surrender it? Are we willing to say, and we surrender it to the pace of nature? I'm willing to work with divine timing. And I'm willing to embrace that sometimes my timing and divine timing might not be the same thing. And can we surrender that desire, that temptation to really separate ourselves from that interconnected weaving of nature of the whole and trying to go against the innate timing that is held within us to that will also be the highest good and benefit of all, including ourselves and for others. So we want to sprinkle in just a little bit of Taoism here, that nature will always seek to balance itself. So when we force ourselves outside of nature, when we separate ourselves and we get an agenda or an attachment to a timing or an outcome or a way of being, and we start to push ourselves into that, that's going to have to balance. It triggers a cause and effect that tries to take the pendulum from swinging too far one way and bring it back in. And the way it has to do it is it has to swing back and forth till it finally comes to center, right? And so we can feel like then that what's happening to us is that we're getting really stuck in this swinging back and forth of trying to make something happen, feeling defeated, trying again, and we get stuck in this push me, pull me, oppositional energy with creation. And then the only way we can come up with the fact that we're in divine timing and make this old myth, this hybrid myth of we are the masters make sense, is our ego has to come up with a way to 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 take this paradox and flatten it out into a very easy black and white thought, which is we are in divine timing. The myth is we are in divine timing if everything is going with grace and ease. We have synchronicities. It's amazing. The inspiration comes in, the people that we need to help us with that, the resources, they just voila come in. And yes, we're moving and doing and answering those calls of movement, but everything is just clicking. It's running along. That's how we know we're in divine timing. Then the opposite of that is part of this myth too, that if we're in struggle, if we're in delays, if we're in problems, if we're in friction, if we're in pushing something up a hill and trying to make it come together, but it just doesn't seem to be doing that, that must mean we're outside of timing. That must mean that we need to go find something, the one thing, the thread that we can pull on, and that is going to equal what we need to fix so that, per this belief system, we get back to grace and ease. We get back to things and synchronicity coming in, and that is our measuring stick, along with that the outcome matches what we want or better. As long as it's one of those things, we say, hey, we're in divine timing. If not, we step ourselves out of it and we try to find the one thing that's happening and put it back in there. Well, this struggle sensation, what this habit creates when we buy into this belief system, when we buy in, this is the way we know that we are, quote, in that divine timing with this grace and this ease, and divine timing matching our own personal desires, wants, and needs. This toxic cycle is actually extremely disempowering to us, right? It puts us in this shame, blame. It puts us in this place of just inner turmoil and really can create a lot of disease as we engage with our life through this lens. And I was here too. I was stuck in this endless shadow loop of like shadow detective. I need to find the one thought or the this, that, and the other, or the limiting belief, or the shock trauma that happened 20 million lifetimes ago, or this, like, I was really stuck in this very pervasive idea that if there was a rock on my runway, it was my responsibility to go find that rock, dissolve that rock, remove it, and then get back to it because it shouldn't be there in the first place. See, that's the issue with this whole belief system. It's really puts this idea that things have gone wrong at the forefront. And so we're on this toxic search of why. Why is this happening to me? Why is this delay showing up? Why is this problem here? Why is this suffering here? And the result of that why is that there has to be a reason to blame. And since there has to be a reason to blame, I can fix it. And then when I fix it, I should have back to that clear runway and it should be all smooth, skipping down it, off I go towards where I want to be. Right? And when we do that, it's just locking us into a very narrow idea of how this law of divine timing actually works. When I was putting this episode together, my oldest daughter, she said she was listening to me kind of do some thoughts on what to bring in and what to kind of leave out, because this idea of surrender is just a huge part, and I can't really dive into it as much as I would like to in the interest of time for this particular offering. But it is part of every mystical journey of awakening, of personal growth, spiritual growth, and of healing, right? This idea that we're going to say, okay, there are threads here that I can't see, that I can't work with, and that I'm not supposed to see or work with. And then the question is, okay, what work is there to do? What is mine and what is not mine to be responsible of in this beautiful pace of nature? What is it that would be helpful for me to bring my beautiful creative mind and attention to? And what would it be extremely helpful for me to let go of and not try to push it, control it, or manipulate it, right? And so she asked me this question. She said, Mom, so if you're telling me that it's not about grace and ease, is how I can tell if something is going, if I'm in this pace of nature, if I am where I need to be, and it's also not this idea that there is suffering or hardship or things are going like wrong, then how do I know when I'm in my flow? How do I know when I'm in the divine timing and maybe not just running down the wrong road and therefore that's why things are hard, or I'm like avoiding something and therefore it looks like grace and ease, but it's really not? Like, how do I actually know that? And I was like, it's a brilliant question, Savannah. I have no idea. Let's ask. So side note here, this I have no idea or I don't know, let's ask, is a cue to my own system to let the mind take a back seat. Because otherwise, when somebody asks me a question, my mind instantly goes through its little like file cabinet and goes tick, 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 and it pulls its own little Google search engine in and says, here's the result. And it's a closed circuit. It only works off of the things that are within it, things I've experienced, things that have been passed down to me through the generation of the book, right? And what I want to do instead is ask this question, this beautiful question that Savannah asked, or my own self questions, and be able to get outside of that closed system, to get beyond just what my mind knows and open myself up to evolutionary change, open myself up to new insights, new ways of being, new territory, new connection moments that allow me to bring together, yeah, maybe some of the stuff I already quote knew, but bring it together in a way that is perfectly customized for this moment, this question, this idea, what's happening right now, because each moment is completely its own individual moment. And so therefore, black and white thinking doesn't transfer. It can help give us insight, it can help be a foundation, but it's going to want to come through completely customized. And so this, I don't know, let's ask, is a cue to my system to do just that. Pause, ask the mental brain to step back, and ask the beautiful heart and soul to come forward so that I can get a customized read of what will work and bring the best. And by work, I don't mean give me an outcome. What will help bring me the most balance, right? What will help bring me into the flow that would allow myself to be a part of divine timing? Surrendering my own ego mind of thoughts, wants, and wishes, and allowing myself to be with what is. So I did that. I asked Savannah that question, and what I got back was pretty much what I was just telling you. And so it's a little unsatisfactory, underwhelming to the ego mind. But in reality, it's the keys to the kingdom, which is divine timing is huge. there are multi-dimensional, interwoven, interconnected answers and threads that are all coming together to form this changing tapestry from moment to moment, right? Because as I am my own creator being with my own thoughts, feelings, and desires, my own actions to follow divine guidance and also go completely in my own direction, that ripples out into that tapestry. And I am just one of millions and millions and millions of beings that are out there, not just human beings, but all beings, right? And as we're all making choices and bringing this in, that creates a time, because we're past choices, current choices, future choices, choices yet to be made, right? All of that is coming in. So to say that there is one thread of probability that we can pull and ride it all the way through to the end without a change, without a pivot, without a pause and adjusting is just really incorrect, because think of all the different choices that are pushing in and moving in on that, right? And it creates an ever-changing wheel that is going to ask us to continuously adapt, to pause, to be in the listening, and then be in the movement that comes from that pause. So while there is no one thread that we can hop on, and in this ever-changing current of waves that are around us, if we bring in more of the metaphor of water and this idea of like getting in the pocket. So I used to love to run rivers and to kayak and do all that stuff. I don't do it now because I just don't have a lot of time, but it's just one of those things that hopefully I'll be able to bring back in here in a little bit. But it's allowing yourself to say, okay, I can think of when I ran this river last time, this was the line that I took, but it's going to be different every single time because the current is continuously moving. The rocks are moving. The bed of the river is moving. And the line that worked for the person who was in front of me and the person who's behind me might not be my line. And so can I be in a living, breathing conversation with the water, with the rocks, with my intuition, that gut intuition saying, go here, go there, and get in the best flow for me down that rapid. It might still include whacking a couple rocks here or there, or going into a little eddy and coming back out. Like it could be completely different for me each time, even though I've gone through that stretch of the river. And so that's that idea, that metaphor that we want to bring into the pace of nature. Like the patience and the surrender and opening to divine timing allows us to say, hey, we want to be in an active conversation. We want to be feeling the currents that are present. And just because we think we know what the answer should be based off of past experience or somebody else's, the way that it's going to want to come forward for us is completely customized. And even in that moment, can we change? Can we adapt? Can we let go of our attachments to what we think it should be so that I can actually respond to what is there? And also the other thing that came through when I asked that question for Savannah is like, the additional way that we gum ourselves up with this idea of am I in divine timing is we get really attached to this marker of success. And that needs to be let go of because that's not part of the equation. Success is in everything that we're doing if we're willing to learn from it, if we're willing to grow from it, if we're willing to allow that experience to be our teacher, then there is no such thing as failures. There's just opportunities to learn, to grow, to expand, to adjust, and to get back in the pocket, right? The images of nature really came through also as I asked that question. Well, let's ask, like, what is a way that we can see and feel that we're in divine timing? And one of the ways that I saw in nature is like there was friction, there was struggle, there was effort, there was ease, there was grace, there was synchronicities, there was elements coming together to support each other through that interwoven, and then there was also, quote, destruction in there. And so allowing ourselves to say that if we're in grace and ease or if we're in struggle is a marker, that just doesn't hold up because all of that is part of the wholeness. So it was an invitation to let that go because, again, friction is not an indication that you're outside of nature because it's a part of nature, right? So it got me really leaning into this question that said, okay, you've just shown me all these reasons again why we can't hold on to those markers, but then how can we help? What is the signal that we are struggling? And it was, look at the ways in which you find yourself working against divine timing. right? Look at the ways you find yourself outside of it as far as a somatic sensation. And so as I leaned into this, it was like, what are the ways in which you know, a part of you absolutely knows that you are pushing time, that you have an idea instantaneously? I know for me, this was a huge one. Once I get an inspiration, I want it done. I want to like push me, pull me. I'm like, ooh, this thought came in. Let's make this happen. Who, what, when, where, why, what resources do I need together? And I can get like a head of steam, a bit like a bulldozer, right? And things get in my way, and I could just really easily keep like pushing through them, problem solve, and make something happen, and punch a hole in something and be like, okay, now we're going through there. And so I began to realize that in those moments, my body literally wants to push through space and time, right? And that somatically, my shoulders come forward, my jaw kind of like braces itself, my hips, I get my weight over top, my hips rotate, my weight comes to the ball of my foot, and I am literally pushing myself through time. I notice this a lot in client sessions out in the arena, especially where I'm standing so much, that as I would get attached, a part of me would get attached to a client getting an aha moment, or having awareness, or the breakthrough that they've been circling and circling and really wanting to see them free themselves up. I would get attached to the timing that I had in my mind and not so flexible and willing to expect the timing that was correct for that client, right? And I would catch my body literally starting to move forward. And I would catch that I would start to literally move my feet and get closer to the client. I was like, whoa, Michelle, come on back here. You're getting a little too invested in what your idea of what should be happening right now versus allowing what wants to be happening to organically come forward and unfold, right? And once I saw it there, I saw it everywhere. I saw that in those moments where I was working on maybe something career wise or financial or health wise, that I was doing the same thing, pushing forward. And it was literally like if I was pushing against a big box, like that's the body posture that my body was getting. And I was like, oh, that's intense. And the invitation for me then was to go into the pause and start to recognize what is behind that push. What's the fear? Oh, if they don't get it, or I don't get that, dot, dot, dot. You know, what's the worry or anticipation? What is what I believe I will have access to once that is? So when that outcome comes forward, then I'll be able to feel happy, content, have a bank account the way I want to be able to do this thing. You know, I was linking it to some outcome that I was then pushing. And by pushing, I was potentially rushing things. And by rushing things, I wasn't allowing things to get the roots that they needed in order to be sustainable, right? Also, I was might have pushed past caution signs that said, it's not time. You're like, don't try to open this door yet. It's not supposed to open, right? And all those other ways that I was taking myself outside and creating a lot of angst, and it was expensive in my system. So that became a huge like awareness to me of the push. The other one is when I was trying to avoid, like hold back time. I didn't want to move forward with something because a part of me felt anxious or nervous or not capable of doing something. Like I didn't understand it or know how it would even be possible. And so a part of me was like holding back. And when that happened, I could feel myself collapse. I could feel myself kind of go inward and come down, or I was holding myself, bracing, right? I was going rigid. I had this habit that I finally saw where I not only cross my legs, but I cross my legs and then wrap my feet around each other. So every part of me was tight. And instead of being too far forward, I was too far back. It was like somebody was dragging me, and I was like dragging my heels and barely willing to move. Then there was the worry energy. I was really maybe worried about, well, how's it going to come across? Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Is this, what if it doesn't happen here? Then what if that? And like I was moving, but I wasn't really necessarily in the flow in an enjoyable way. And when I felt that energy, I had a lot of back and forth energy in me. Like not like a nice figure eight rock, like a qigong rock, but like a wobble, right? Like a literal kind of whirling energy or a shifting of feet. I couldn't find a settling within my body. And I realized that that was, oops, sorry, didn't mean to move that, that really was a opportunity for me to see where I was in balance and where I was adapting to the pace of nature and allowing myself to be a part of that, or where I was taking myself out and pushing too hard. And I'd love to invite you into a similar practice this week of allowing yourself to start to recognize when you might be fighting against that idea that there is a timing outside of our own personal timing, that there's a push to us, that there's a worry energy to us, that there's a fear energy to us. And when that happens, how can we invite ourselves into more awareness, more surrender, more releasing that responsibility to get it right, and instead allowing ourselves just to focus on what is our responsibility. And that's one of the things that really came clear when I was in the meditations after Savannah asked me that question, is like I was taking so much ownership for trying to manage all these threads, and I was hemorrhaging energy when I was running that way. And now that hopefully I'm a little better, so everyone's a work in progress, that when I was in that moment, that I could still allow myself to say, okay, pause. I'm starting to take more responsibility than is my due. I'm starting to want to keep track of all these different threads. And I'm starting to feel that I am responsible for ensuring that this matches what I want it to match. And is that true or is that not true? And what is the cost of that in my system? So when we can release that struggle energy from trying to either make things happen, to move, adjust, lock into the one way of being, the way that we want it to be, the way we think it should be, or we're feeling like we have to kind of like hold back the changing tides, when we are allowing ourselves to let all of that go, then we can allow ourselves to move into that sweet spot, that Goldilocks spot, that pocket, so to speak, of that river that I was talking about, right? And we can allow ourselves to accept this beautiful freedom that's within this quote, which is that every creation is a part of the pace of nature. And within that pace of nature, there is a willingness to be in each stage, to allow ourselves to find the beauty in all of those different stages. So instead of just waiting for the moment where that flower pops its head up and opens it to that beautiful moment and just enjoying that short moment, it's like, no, can we enjoy all the stages of our life from the or of a choice that we're in the process of incarnating, from the moment where it's hidden from us and it's just starting to gather its ideas, to where it starts to send its little roots down and roots up and build in the stability that it needs, popping itself above the dirt and starting to come into the light to where we can see it and interact with it. You know, do we have that patience to declare to ourselves that, yes, I'm willing to be in alignment and in harmony, and trusting that the movements and the actions will come forward when they're ready? And that it's our job to just open to that pause, to that stillness between the inspiration and the action, and to feel into those currents of that moving water, right, that are present, so that we can be in the flow with the actions that want to come forward when we feel the nudge to come forward. And then can we release ourselves from attaching ourselves to the outcome or what we think should be happening as we are in those actions. So we're not having to just tolerate the quote delays and missteps and see things as suffering or as problems, and instead allow us to just say, hey, this is what's here. And then we can free ourselves from that whole toxic belief system of grace and ease or struggle, and let go of that whole thing, not have to go on all these huge whodunit mysteries, and let go of the why. The why version with hands on hip, furrowed brow. What is wrong here? Who did something wrong? Can we let that whole thing go? Because when we walk with the ability to walk with patience, we really open up to our heart and to our soul. And so we can stay connected with our original purpose of that inspiration, which was to create something that we love, to experiencing the joy of that creation, to being in the moment with it as it's within all of its different stages. The beautiful ones that we love, and the beautiful ones that also might be with friction and heartache and hardship. Right? Can we see those as part of that tapestry of moving threads that I mentioned earlier? So when we can show up with this, all of a sudden our expectations become less. And therefore, the medicines of compassion and love and understanding, they really start to come forward and be a part of us so that when we get triggered, when we go, wow, I really wish this experience was something that I wasn't having right now, we can quickly take an exit ramp in our nervous system so that we don't further separate ourselves from our nature, from the ability to support ourselves. And when we separate ourselves, we really get lost in resentments, anger, disease, rage, and self-doubt and blame, and making our world smaller, 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 and tighter, 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 and more isolated because we're taking ourselves out of the whole of it. So when we surrender to that pace of nature, we can stop focusing on the outcome, stop chasing that dopamine hit, right? And we can genuinely enjoy the ride. We can genuinely find those moments where we are trying to push time, trying to sandbag time, trying to manipulate and control time, and force it to match our agendas. We can let go of all of that angst and be more in the question of what will serve us best now, what would be optimal. And one of the really interesting things that's just kind of dropping in right now that I found as I started to shift from this, I started to really recognize that a lot of the inspiration that I was getting was just to get me moving. It was just to start me from being like in a stagnant, stuck position or a habitual position to like thinking, oh, there's something different and new. And that it wasn't actually to bring all of those inspirations all the way through to fruition. A lot of times it was just to get me moving, and then it would pivot, it would shift, it would change. So where I was staying locked in to this original inspiration, but this is what I originally got. This was my vision. I envisioned it this way. And if I stayed stuck to that, then I was missing the breadcrumb, so to speak, of where my divine timing was trying to bring me, right? And what it was trying to help me enjoy, experience, and interact with, and therefore be able to offer out to the others, right? And out to the world in that beautiful interconnected web. So this is where I like to remind clients that we just don't have to sit and wait when we feel that we're in a pause. It's not just endure that purgatory, that we can actually relax and realize that there's some pretty amazing things that are happening in those waits. So if you find yourself in a pause moment, if you find yourself in the first part of surrender, which is called the dark night of the senses, where everything just kind of starts to soften and to disconnect a little bit and is a little less shiny, a little less drive. A lot of what we do in that first dark night is we start to like reboot the thing. This is what I love to do. This is what I can do. And we start moving, 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 moving. And we're afraid to settle. And we're afraid to settle because we know something's going to change. And so what I like to invite clients to do is just to really soften that attachment to that the pause is going to somehow create unrest, because it's not unrest it's creating, it's like divine chaos, which is something we need to unplug from so that we can plug ourselves into something else. We won't know what that is if we keep pushing, if we just keep moving, if we just keep doing. And so a huge part of nature is pause, is surrender, is offering ourselves an opportunity to be in that space between that stimulus and that response, and letting the response come through us in a way that is actually for the highest good and benefit of all, which includes you, which is part of nature, which then brings it to everyone. So when we can surrender into that stillness, we can let that stillness begin to move us. And then we're in soul-led movements. Then we're in the pocket, right? Then we're in the place where it's okay to have some friction and to have some pivots and to be in the part of the river that maybe isn't the lazy river, to be in the part of the river that maybe feels a little stagnant and slow and we're having to pedal pretty hard. Like instead of thinking we've done something wrong to end up there, it's just like, no, this is where we're at. And that's okay. The resources that we need to work through that moment can be there if we're willing to meet it without a story that says we're right or we're wrong. Can we let that go? Can we surrender that? So that's the practice for this week of exploring our relationship with patience, willingness to surrender, and to release the attachments that when we find ourselves outside of our heart's desires of timing, that doesn't mean that we're outside divine timing, right? Can we uncouple those two things and allow them to be separate, because they really are? And can we be excited when they match, but when they're not write this huge story upon ourselves that somehow, some way, we're doing something wrong, the universe is doing something wrong, and just really bashing ourselves, which is just doesn't feel good. So if it feels good to you, I invite you to take a few deep breaths in, and let's drop into a short practice about this. Becoming aware of when we are pushing time this week, when we're trying to withhold time from happening, when we're trying to manipulate it, because that's the clue. Like, we don't need to worry about what the timing is. Our only focus, our only responsibility is to notice when we are somehow manipulating the flow that is wanting to be there and be present. So just take a few deep breaths in, and let's pull up that idea of a goal or something that you might be currently working on or have in the past. And just like for me, what was that body energy? What is the posture that goes with a push? I really want this done. I'm really attached to it. I really feel committed to this. I feel inspired. I feel passionate about it. I feel like this would be in the best interest of myself and everybody else. And I get really locked in. What does that feel like in your body? What thoughts go with that energy? If something does show up as a quote delay or outside of your expectations. Now let's go for what are the energies that are present in and around your body and the thoughts that go with it when you find yourself avoiding. How does that manifest itself in and around your body? What fears or worries, what postures? There was a little bubble above that part of your body, what would it say? What would it feel? And how about the unsure piece? Like that, am I doing the right thing? The doubt, the revisiting a choice 20 million times, holding yourself in like a whirlpool, like a little eddy that just keeps spinning you and spinning you and spinning you. What does that energy feel like in and around your body? And what type of thoughts are with that? So if it feels good to you, I invite you to open up a Reiki orb of energy. Just call that in. Ask for it to support you, for healing strands of grace to help soften any fears or worries, maybe even resentments or anger towards the past or a current situation where you feel this angst. Opening up to that soul medicine of patience and its partner surrender. Surrendering that idea that it's you that has to figure this out. Your mind has to manage that and do it all on its own. Can we surrender that? Can you like let that go? You open to the soul medicine of trust, trusting that nature has the best interest, the highest good and benefit of all is what it's seeking, that balance, that wholeness, that love. And if it feels good to you, I invite you to join me this week for the practice of cultivating that willingness to walk with the rhythm of nature, of patience, of surrender, of trust in the divine, and to really be finding that through awareness with your physical body, right? To just have this little witnessing available to you, these moments of checking in. What is my body saying as a sacred messenger right now? Where are the moments where I feel that push? I realize I am walking through space and time with the front part of me pushing myself, not centered. I am walking through space and time collapsed with a weight behind me, not really wanting to meet that moment, to walk into that room from a centered space. I'm not even walking into that room. I'm completely avoiding and I'm just spinning in a corner somewhere energetically. Like, help me find and bring my attention and awareness to those moments that week so that I can find when I am stuck in worry about an outcome or how to ensure that everything is going to my liking or the timing or somebody else's liking. Can I soften that and release that expectation so that I can be more with what is? Can I find awareness when I'm holding myself, embracing and resentments and judgments of either what is happening, I don't like it, I don't want it to be here, or what's not happening, why isn't this here, who's doing what wrong, who, what, when, where, why. And it may be from the past, and maybe even projected into the future. I have an inspiration, it's not going to work because ... Where am I stalling myself out? And then finally, in that, like, where do I find myself holding myself from stepping into motion? I can feel the urge to move. It's coming from a balanced, centered place, and yet I'm not moving. I'm hitting a wall, right? Help me feel that throughout this week so that I can release the tolerating of delays, problems, or issues, and open instead to finding the joy, the wonder, the love, the opportunities that are held within that timing. Help direct my flow to engage with the thoughts that will partner with these medicines of patience and surrender. Help me be able to see the pauses that are being asked of me, and in that pause, surrendering those angsty moments so that I can have trust in divine timing and movement that comes from the stillness. Let's deep breath in and out, and so it is. Peace, peace, peace. Well, we made it through this week. So I was a little bit nervous when this one dropped in, and I was like, "Oh, this is a short time frame to take on a big concept." But hopefully, it has piqued some interest, brought in some nuggets that really will support you on your journey. I hope that as you work with this practice, that it helps bring that awareness of the hidden ways in which you might be struggling, and suffering with inner division within yourself. And you can remind yourself, is this necessary? Do I really need to be doing this dance right now? Or can I let some stuff go? And can I remind myself to have patience, surrender to divine timing, and open up to that beautiful question of what is here and what will best serve me right now to meet what is here and present in this moment. Until next time, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. See ya. Thank you for listening to Soulful Practices. For more information on how to work directly with me or one of my guests, check out the show notes below. We'd love for you to also let us know what parts of this episode are speaking to you and how this practice is supporting you on your healing and spiritual journey. Please share this podcast with fellow seekers, travelers. Together, we can create a wave of soul-led beings in this world, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. Michelle Holling Brooks. Until next time.